We're here with Scott, and we're having a great time. So we're getting ready for which opening?
It's Carinthia West. She's a photographer based in London, and I've only recently gotten to know her, but she has some tremendous photos of her friends from the 70s, 80s, 90s that I think most of your viewers will recognize.
And it's not just that she went to their concert and took pictures, as Rick was saying, but that she actually had intimate friendships and relationships with people.
I'm sorry. These are her friends. And the photos are like if you and I were taking pictures with our friends at a party. Her friends just happen to be Mick Jagger and Rod Stewart and David Bowie and
Linda Ronstadt. Yeah.
So
name dropping, but it's true.
But a very, very behind-the-scenes, intimate look at an exciting time in pop culture, and glad to be a part of it.
Now, you do have a very interesting journey that you yourself are carving out for yourself. So your journey with Blue Line Art is that you represent a certain genre of artist.
Yeah, mostly, would be considered pop artists. Based on like the Andy Warhol school of art. So yes, so contemporary painters and of course photographers that capture our contemporary Americana.
Do you have a favorite artist that you like to collect? What's hanging in your own home?
Probably my most favorite piece would be a Rauschenberg. That I have a print, so that's.
And how did you acquire that? What was that moment like for you? Because acquiring art is like having a child almost, right? It's like you're bringing the baby home and, you coddle it.
It was a friend of mine, and I admired it for long enough that she finally agreed to sell it to me.
She goes, okay, take it, it's yours.
Stop bothering me.
Stop begging me for it. And where's it hanging?
It's in my dining room right now. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So I asked you earlier if you had any art ability or music ability, and what was your answer?
Music, no, but I do paint.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you paint?
I've been doing a lot of portraits. Yeah.
Of humans?
Of humans.
Because sometimes people do pet portraits.
Yeah, I haven't branched out to that yet, but yes, of humans. I've done a series of portraits of old blues players. Yeah, so American roots blues players, B.B. King, Son House, Robert Johnson, that sort of thing.
And are you doing them in pencil, acrylic, oil?
They're acrylics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And where do you start? Do you start with somebody's eyes or the shape of their head or their nose? Like what feature do you try to capture first?
I guess I try to do more of an outline. I tend to do a charcoal sketch on the canvas first and then add the paint.
Well, it's been wonderful visiting with you, and thank you for the invitation to this wonderful gallery.
So glad you're here.
We're here at this wonderful gallery. First time that you've shown here?
It is indeed. I'm very excited. I'm so excited to be the first time I've shown in New York. Absolutely the first time. I've shown in Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco, but New York's the pinnacle, as we all know, and I'm very excited indeed, and it looks wonderful. It's the first time I've seen the way that the team in the gallery have hung the work, and it looks, I haven't had a chance to walk around yet, but it looks great. Absolutely.
You would have curated it very similar, probably. Like I like the way that it's kind of themed and how you've got Mick together and.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I've got various images that aren't even here that might, then at the moment I have a show in the Channel Islands in England, so they have slightly different. But I always love certain pictures that tell a story, so I try to tell the story behind the pictures rather than just having photographs of famous people. And of course, I took many photographs in my life, and they weren't always famous people, and they were the street people. And so what happens when you start to be known for the well-known people is that's what people want to see, which is understandable. But actually, I have street scenes and driving myself across America and, farmers in a field and difficult situations too. So I have quite an archive. looking forward to going through that archive more constructively.
And are most of the photographs you take, are they of the human face, like the landscape? When you talk about all the other images that you've captured, is that how you see someone's face?
You mean, have I taken landscape? Yes, I'm fascinated by people. Yeah, and people in context with the landscape and what it means. I mean, your great photographers in America, Ansel Adams, Elliot Erwitt, you know, some of those wonderful early pictures, or French photographers, who Cartier-Bresson, have always, seems to me, had a slight sense of humor about what they, how they place a person in a landscape. And I love that, particularly
whimsy.
Particularly Elliot Erwitt.
Well, I love one of your pieces. I had read that is when they were going to Diana Ross's child's 4th birthday, and it's just playful. And I see that whimsy and that kindness in a lot of your photos.
That's really kind. Well, thank you. I think that it was because we were young. You know, we were laughing a lot. We used to laugh, for example, here I am being interviewed, but we'd go, oh, remember one day you'll be interviewed for your photographs, ha, 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 and you go, no, never. And, so I think you don't realize when you're taking a picture that it might become something that the younger generation want to see, and that's what's interesting. Because I don't think I'd be half as committed to showing my photographs if I didn't have 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds saying, wow, that's interesting, that's great, that shows that person in a new light. Because otherwise I think you just become a sort of, rather depressing memory person. I remember when, Should I be looking at the camera?
No, the talking to me is just absolutely fine. So you were speaking of the youth of today, and one of the things I had read also was that it was your godchildren or your godchild that said, these are beautiful. You should do something with them. You should share them with the world. Is that how it started?
Yeah, very true. And I have American godchildren, and godchildren who live all over the world, Australia, Africa. And one of them may turn up in a minute. Okay. And they are my best critics. And my best judges. And if they think something's boring,
Fix it, it's in the can.
They're prepared to, Instagram, Snapchat it. Oh, yeah, no, that's cool. And in fact, one who may show up in a minute is desperate to get a David Bowie shot for her best friend who's 14 and who's a Bowie fanatic. So I said I'd send a small print to her school for that. I didn't take pictures with an eye to the future, and that they happen to be of interest now. I think that's why you have the right intention in your photograph. I mean, none of us ever thought we'd be that interesting when we got older, because we were a generation that was venerating youth. I think 60s, 70s, we were all like, party on down, and nothing, we're not going to be living. I mean, I'll just tell you a funny anecdote today, because we went to pick up some friends. I met Dr. Henry Kissinger.
You did?
Yes.
At lunch?
No.
Oh.
He was in the place that we were collecting the father of my goddaughter from. And we all, I'm kicking the goddaughter going, this is Dr. Kissinger. Who's that? And I'm going, you need to know that you've met him.
Yes.
And we introduced them, and he was so gracious and sweet, and asked her where she was at school. But he's a piece of history. Whether you like what he did or not, he's a piece of history, and living history, and may not live that much longer. And the fact that when you're young you meet someone like that, or you're interested, or about something, great.
Now, you had such wonderful upbringing, filled with culture, filled with art, filled with music, filled with opportunity, right? Do you think that played a part in colorizing your soul of who you are now as an adult?
I had amazing parents. And I think if you're lucky enough to have interesting, engaged, funny parents who took life seriously but lightly, knew about art, knew about music, entertained. My father was, as you say, rather extraordinary. He was the Americans call a 5-star general, and had a posting in Washington during the Kennedy years. So I wasn't stuck in some English boarding school. I was brought to America. I was at school in Washington. And so I learned very early on, leaning over the banisters was more fun than writing your homework.
And did you ride down any banisters? I can see you doing that.
A little bit, I
yeah.
wasn't too good a kid, But I think if you're lucky enough to have parents who are very engaged, and I mean, they were ahead of their time in many ways, yeah. So, yes, I think that was a lot to do with it. But didn't mean I didn't rebel.
As we all should, exactly, right? As we all should. A little bit of naughty, right? A little bit of naughty. Your Canon. So have you always shot with the same camera, or were most of these taken with a prized camera?
Canon EF or Canon AE1, or even earlier than that, I had another Canon, I forget the name of it, but all of these are film, none of these are digital. A couple may be reprinted in digital, because I can't find the negative, for example, and I have a print. But they're all from film slides or, film on negatives or slides. Absolutely. And I don't think that I would I take pictures now, like everyone, everywhere, on your phone, on your iPad, everywhere. But the thing that worries me, and I know a lot of others, is that how do you keep them? Do you know where they're going to disappear? How are you going to find them? And if you're a professional photographer, obviously you're very religious in how you edit and you get rid of things and things like that. I take mine now mostly for identification, for remembering, for reference. But these are, this is just a tip of the iceberg, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. So. I'm intrigued.
I know. But it may not be that they're of interest to lots of people, because these are the more well-known people. And, of course, working for an exhibition, I think, well, who's going to want a picture of an old car in the desert in Mexico,
I don't know. You might be surprised. Maybe there are many different chapters, right? Or, right? Yeah. Journals of different things, all chapters. This will be the famous people chapter. This will be the farmer chapter.
Well, I'm excited. I'm being introduced to the National Portrait Gallery, and they may take one of my photographs. And I think the archive would be wonderful for me if an American university, for example, or an English, or someone really looked at it and said, how great.
To house this as a collection for you as well. Yeah. I interviewed Nelson DeMille, who's an author. And what he does is he actually, when you talk about archiving things, he hand writes all of his books on yellow legal pads. Right. And then he gave them to his alma mater, and they have them stored there. So your photographs and your negatives and all of the things, I think you're right. I think it would be lovely if somehow that they could be, archived.
It would be that would be my great dream, is to feel that they were cared for and looked after. And especially, when you die, and we don't know when that will happen, but I think of, obviously, the story of Vivian Mayer, who they found all her work in a lock-up storage unit, and she wasn't appreciated in her lifetime, and how wonderful for her would that be, probably, if she knew that, people loved her work, and reprinting it in books, and I thought that was an extraordinary story.
And this week here at this gallery, they're going to be having a wonderful party for you, an opening reception.
Unbelievable. And we've got a documentary team flying in from Iceland.
I was wondering where they were from.
Yeah, Saga Films, who are involved with the Tribeca Film Festival. And I'm so touched because they've come to my house in England, and they've gone through things, and they've said, wow, you've got so much more here. And we've interviewed some pretty famous people, including Mick Jagger and Ronnie Wood, the documentary. And I'm not allowed to say what they said, but it was all nice.
Oh, that's good. You're not allowed to say, but eventually it'll come out in the documentary.
I have to wait for the, yeah.
It'll be revealed later.
I like it that Mick thought that, I only took he said she always takes happy pictures, which I thought is nice, because we actually always, that's the side of the Rolling Stones, you know, that people don't see always, because you see people on stage and they're well known and you know them for that. But there's a lot of laughs around these people privately, and that includes everyone I've photographed. Helen Mirren and I shared a flat. And
Yes, I read a little bit about that. The touching moment where you said she was the only one that was earning money. So what did she do at that time?
yeah, so she took the maid's room. We called it the maid's room. You're probably not allowed to say that now. I better exercise that. But it was a smaller room in the back of the house, back of the kitchen. And my friend, the other person sharing, was Rory Flynn, who is Errol Flynn's daughter. And she and I were both not really earning much in Hollywood at that time. And Helen was doing a film with Baryshnikov called White Nights, was earning quite a lot. And she didn't really need a room, and they'd have put her in a hotel, but she said, it'd be much more fun, darling, to share with you and Rory. So, and Rory, by the way, is the girl in the Bottoms picture.
Yeah, hot pants. Right. She's the middle subject, right?
One.
And Rod Stewart is in that image?
In the corner of the bottom right, yeah.
It sounds like your time with all of them was so wonderful and so glorious. Are there maybe a couple of little memories that stand out for you? Like special things that you'd want to share with me?
Ronnie said in his interview, you know, Carinthia took pictures while we were getting on in life. I was getting on with life too, and it was just my life. I had a lot of friends, a lot of fun, and people like Robin Williams and his wife Valerie were incredibly generous to me, you know, and I never had a great deal of money, but, you know, I had a job at the LA Weekly at one point. I was a model, I was a journalist, whatever. And, you know, I was just talking to a friend here because we went to a restaurant nearby, which was owned by the same people who used to own the Odeon restaurant, the McNally brothers, you know, and I can remember going there in the 70s, 80s, you know, somewhere there. And Robin would do a great show somewhere, and then he'd take 30 of us out to dinner, and they were so generous, these people. It was so, and nobody was conscious of their own fame so much. Does that make sense? So, you know, because you weren't being selfied and photographed every 2 minutes, and so people could be a bit more natural, and it's like hanging out with your friends, which is why I like calling it hanging out, because it really genuinely is hanging out. And one thing always led to another, like Shelley Duvall in that picture was doing the shoot with Altman, and through her I met Sissy Spacek, and I think there's a picture of her here somewhere. And then Shelley was breaking up with Paul Simon, so, you know, I was liaising a bit between, and then I met Paul, you know. And then Lorne Michaels, who had Saturday Night Live, was producing it. I worked with Eric Idle in the Rutles and Rutland Weekend Television. So Lorne, you know, always invited us to all the Saturday Night Live. So you then met John Belushi, blah, 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 you know. But I'm sure it's the same for the young now, who are of the same generation. Because when you're young and beautiful and it's fun, and you're lucky enough, put that very firmly, lucky enough to be around artistic and people, there's a networking system that goes into place. So.
Well, I even think at our age, you know, I'm still feeling young, beautiful, and zesty.
And you look it, darling.
And I think we're having a lot of fun, right? But life really is, you know, what we make of it. And, you know, speaking of Simon, I'm looking over here and I see another piece of work, Carly. That's a lovely image.
That's an extraordinary story.
Okay.
Because we were in the River Cafe in Brooklyn, and I was having lunch with her and another photographer, Lynn Goldsmith, and Lynn was on the right, and Carly was facing the view, and I said a joke or something, and she drew her head back and laughed, and the picture was great, and off it went back in a drawer. I forgot all about it. And then, of course, years later, after the terrible 9/11 events, I was bringing out pictures, and there was the World Trade Center reflected in her sunglasses. And she told me that, because she still remains a very good friend of mine, she told me that she'd written the Working Girl theme, Let the River Run, about the Brooklyn River and this and that, before World Trade Center, obviously. But what's so interesting is that the young, when they see that picture, quite often go, "Oh, that's brilliant, you photoshopped the World Trade Center in her glasses." I went, "No, this was 1980. They were there. They actually existed." So we have this, you know, you might go back to President Trump, you know, we have this fake news for what's true, what's not, and you have to get to the bottom of it. Yeah, and that's...
And you have this picture too, so sweet, of Linda Ronstadt and Mick. That's a tender moment.
Yeah, she's been so lovely about that picture. I went to tea with her in San Francisco a year ago, and she's not been very well. And
Is it Parkinson's that she has with?
yeah, but she was moving around, getting me tea, doing, you know, being funny and being as gracious as ever. And I told her that I felt that picture was very much Mick being very mischievous with two women, myself and her, and I'm never going to enlarge on that.
As we blush.
We have to laugh. Boys will be boys.
Yes, indeed. So these are moments that you captured. They're authentic. They're reflections of the time of your life. And I think that's what's so lovely, is that you are sharing these intimate moments and these portraits with all of us. You're really sharing, in a way, a story, if you will. And there are so many. Are there any other favorites? Maybe if they're not even hanging here, favorite moment for you?
You know, I don't really, but I do think what's incredibly important about anything of any picture in this room is the trust and the affection, because there's too many people telling too many bad stories, and the affection, my subtitle for this is The Affectionate Archive, because not only did I go to every single person in the pictures and say, "You okay, me showing this?" which I don't have to do because I own the copyright, but I think it's part of the respect you give people when they're photographed. And too many people just take a picture and run, or they sign a release and forget about it, you know. But so favorites, not really. I mean, I am thrilled that there's a documentary being made. I'm thrilled for you. Because that means to me, how lovely is that? Some other lovely people are taking it over, and I don't have to think about it again. So it'll all be there, you know, in the story. But I'm really touched, and thank you for being here and taking an interest in it. And this gallery have been wonderful, so contemporary. Yes. On for a few weeks, and I hope people come down and see it. And you ask about favorites. I do rather love the Paul Getty picture.
Okay.
Mainly because Paul did not really have a very happy life. You probably know Paul Getty Jr. And he was kidnapped. He had his ear sliced off. But by this time of that picture taken, he had had 2 children, a boy and a girl. And yeah, and the girls in the other. I have other pictures, so there's another child in the other picture. But this is Balthazar Getty in the forefront, who's, I believe now, is quite a big, famous actor in America. We have very different actors in America. Yes. And Paul just happened to come in the room of their San Francisco apartment. And it has a kind of whimsical fairy tale quality to it. And Paul really didn't have a very happy life and is sadly no longer with us and had got ill before. But I think he loved that picture. He really loved it. I gave him a copy, and his wife gave him a copy.
Well, you have a gift. You have a gift not of your photography, but also of your spirit. It's such, you know, you enjoyed being interviewed by me, but I loved being, you know, visiting with you. I feel like I've met a new friend. You are lovely and just so like you can actually feel the energy emanate from you, and I hope you can feel that from me as well. But you know, artists like
me to be 5 minutes late, having had some oysters with my friends.
Oh, you had oysters. I was going to say you could have at least brought me an oyster.
It was so nice.
Thank you very, very much, and I wish you all the very, very best in life.